This is what Parkinson's looks like to most spouses and caregivers. This is what Parkinson's looks like to a neurologist. And this is what Parkinson's looks like to a research scientist. But what if we looked at Parkinson's in a different way? What if we looked at Parkinson's like this and discovered something new? For those familiar with Parkinson's, you've probably heard that exercise and physical activity is one of the best ways to treat and slow the progression of Parkinson's. In addition to that, studies have found that coffee or tea can be helpful in preventing and slowing the disease's progress also, possibly because of plant compounds. In fact, there are over 50 studies showing that smoking, while not a treatment, does have protective and preventative properties against the development of Parkinson's by up to 50%. Many believe that this is either because of plant compounds found in tobacco and other nightshade plants, or it could be when smoked. It works directly on the region of the brain affected by Parkinson and somehow protects it in that way. What if all the data existed to stop Parkinson's, but we've just been looking at it all wrong? What if there was a common thread among all known protective activities that pointed to the same benefit and possibly the cause of Parkinson's? What if the most significant benefit from exercise was the same as that from smoking?
Hello, and welcome to this recently vacated blank void. It's an inside joke for those in the know. My name is Brian, and on July 2nd, 2020, I was diagnosed with stage 1 Parkinson's disease. Pro tip, it's not supposed to look like that. Now, while nobody wants to hear news like that, it kind of helped me understand what was going on. You see, prior to my diagnosis, I commonly had this twitch in the arch of my left foot and a frequent sense of pressure on the inside joints of my left hand, along with a tremor in my index finger. I also had an unexplained loss of athletic performance, and it became so difficult for me to write, I lost the ability to effectively sign my name. I found it growingly difficult to use my dominant hand while driving. Additionally, I had a great deal of brain fog. What I had always known and understood took me longer to grasp and apply. It took years, but finally, I was diagnosed. Soon after my diagnosis, it got to the point where I stopped driving with my left hand altogether. I seemingly could not do it. Now, I didn't want to lose that ability, so I forced myself to try. But when I did, it only lasted for a few seconds before my arm would fall back into my lap. No tremors, just a kind of paralyzing heaviness. I also found it harder and harder to type, because typing involves precise time reaction. When I would go to strike a key with my left hand, my fingers would hesitate, they would shake, and then strike a key late, multiple times, out of place.
I could literally see my Parkinson's developing before my very eyes.
This was just over 6 months into my diagnosis. Now, as I'm sure it is with anyone who's been diagnosed, they'd ask, why me? And I was no different. I've been a distance runner since high school. As an adult, I've run dozens of races, from half marathons to full marathons. I've also done triathlons, including a 140.6 mile Ironman. Yeah, I did that. And I've drank coffee for as long as I can remember. Now, what most people who know me don't know about me is that I was a smoker. Sorry, Mom. And I smoked for over a decade. For a while, a pack a day. So given the research and the treatments, with how much I've exercised, how much coffee I've drank, and how long I had smoked, one would think, based on the research, that this wouldn't have happened to me. But it did. And despite being a distance runner, at the time of my diagnosis, I struggled to run even a mile. So obviously I asked, why me? And I wanted to find out. Since at the time of my diagnosis, I didn't know much about Parkinson's, I did all the usual reading to learn more about it and not only what could be done to manage it, but what else could be done to stop it. But I didn't want to travel down all the same roads as everyone else and be led to the same conclusions. The only way I was going to learn anything new was to take a fresh look at the research and evaluate it in ways others may not have. Instead of focusing entirely just on Parkinson's, I broadened my view and focus on the foundations of health and went from there. Years ago, maybe 5 or 6, I watched a documentary called In Defense of Food, which led me to many other like-minded videos, websites, and articles. Over that time, I learned of the healthiest people in the world. These people live in what are called the blue zones. Among these communities, neurodegenerative diseases are nearly non-existent. Matter of fact, many of the people live well into their 90s with virtually no mental decline. They're located in 5 regions throughout the world with different climates. They also have different genetics and more. So, what is it about these diverse communities that made them so protected? In studying them, researchers identified 9 habits that were common among all of them. And with that, let's take a closer look. Nice. All right. First off, people of the blue zones don't pump iron or run marathons. They move naturally and do things like gardening and washing dishes by hand. They eat mostly plants. And those that do eat meat, limited to about once a week and only about 4 ounces. They don't overeat. When they're 80% full, they stop eating. They wake up with a purpose and make a plan for the day. Not the same as seeing what's on their schedule. It's more of having an outlook for their life that day. They also downshift. They pause, spending time focusing on ancestor, time in prayer, taking naps, or having a happy hour. 4 out of the 5 groups in the blue zones drink alcohol moderately each day. And they're social. They belong, usually to a faith-based group. They have an inner circle of close, trusted friends, and they keep close family ties. No, not like that. But oddly relevant. Now, 5 of the last 6 are closely related to an outwardly approach to life, which is fine, but I wanted something that would have more of a direct impact on my inner physical condition. So for me, I focused on the first 3. Moderate exercise, not aggressive race training. Eating mostly a plant-based diet and not overeating. Along with that, I practiced intermittent fasting to promote autophagy. Intermittent fasting is another practice that aligns with the communities of the blue zones and was also recommended by the New England Journal of Medicine on December 26, 2019 for Parkinson's and Alzheimer's patients. Initially, things went well and I felt better. But it also seemed like I was just feeling better because I was eating a better diet. There was nothing really that gave me the confidence to know that I had stopped the progression of my disease. Months passed, and whereas the brain fog had lessened, the twitching in my foot continued. The tremors in my index finger became a little more constant, along with this developing sense of physically being able to feel the nerves in my arm, like sandpaper. This is about the time that I found activities that involved my left arm, such as driving, typing, and writing, to become more difficult. And then, on the morning of April 19th, when I sat down at my desk, I saw this article in a news feed. It was an article that stated among the big 5 personality traits, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, those most aligned with the personality trait neuroticism stood out as those at the greatest risk for Parkinson's. It described how 80% of the top quartile people with neuroticism develop Parkinson's. 80%? The article went on to state anxiety and depression are comorbid with Parkinson's disease. And it also stated that many people with Parkinson's tend to be anxious or tend to get depressed. Well, no kidding. With all that stress, makes you wonder if the old saying's true that you really can't worry yourself sick. One could only hope that the other sayings are true too. That maybe an apple a day really can't keep the doctor away. Or maybe that a blueberry in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. But can we check that last one? Yeah, I don't think that's right. Anyways, blueberries are good for the brain, so go ahead, eat up. I'm sorry, where were we? Oh yeah, anxiety, depression, and being anxious. Now, words can have many synonyms, but let's define those in this way. Anxiety as fear, depression as sadness, and anxious as eager. And that last one is important to mention because most people just lump anxiety and anxious together. as just being social anxiety, fear. And the anxious eagerness connection, it's not something that should be overlooked. So after reading that article, I looked up the traits of neuroticism. And nothing really jumped out at me. It read more like a horoscope, kind of broad and could relate to many people on some level. But then I saw this link for neurosis. Even though the descriptor box stated it's no longer a term used by the professional psychiatric community, I clicked through and started to reading. As I made my way down the page, I reached the symptoms and causes section. In a moment, I knew how and why I had developed Parkinson's. Some of the items hit the nail right on the head for me, such as unpleasant or disturbing thoughts, repetition of thoughts, habitual fantasizing, and I'm sure, why not, perfectionism. And with that, you have a recipe for disaster. To explain those out a bit better and how they relate to me, think of them in this way. Perfectionism is repeatedly doing something over and over and over, but never satisfied with the end result. Habitual fantasizing, think of Ralphie from A Christmas Story. Yeah, kind of like that. Yep. I mean, it's okay to dream, but yeah, I would refer to myself as habitual. Then there's repetition of thoughts. This was the biggest one for me because I consciously knew this about myself and just thought of it as a strange quirk. I thought of it as my brain being on loop, running through a problem or revisiting a scenario from my past over and over and over in my head, trying to come up with a solution, but never making progress or getting resolve. In computing, this is called an infinite loop. It's when a computer runs a block of code over and over, nonstop. Eventually, this will eat up all the computing resources until the machine crashes. Now, apply that continuous stress load to the human brain, and the result isn't good either. As far as the unpleasant or disturbing thoughts, that's just imagining worst case scenarios for everyday events. Still habitual fantasizing, just weirdly darker thoughts which would result in an unnecessary buildup of stress that never resolves and just lingers. Now, the fantasizing, the wonder, the repetition is also what happened when I started thinking about Parkinson's. Repeatedly asking, what if this? What if that? And in the case of current treatments, questioning why. If the current treatments were to be so believed to work, why didn't they prevent my condition? So I knew those weren't the final answers, and nobody ever has thought of it that way. But I kept repeatedly asking myself, what is it about them that kind of work? And asking it over and over for months. So I just kind of outed myself as having some self-diagnosed mental disorder that's not even recognized anymore. So what? Everyone's got something going on. Except for maybe Tom Hanks.
Well, this is it. Checked over the entire internet, and this is what I figured out. So now I just got to tell people. Just have to make it convincing. Yes, I know people are going to think I'm crazy for saying all this. I know. Yeah. I know nobody's going to believe this. But just give me time to prove my point. They'll understand. So we've got time. We've still got time. Just look at the play bar. There's still time to convince them. Play bar.
Is that what they call a rough cut? Because that was rough. But yeah, every step of the way, I've doubted myself and whether or not I should even bother making this, in case I'm wrong. But I'm fairly convinced that chronic mental dysfunction causes a buildup of stress in the brain that results in some sort of pressure or inflammation. And if that behavior goes on too long, it starts to slowly suffocate the brain, similar to the way a boa constrictor would squeezes its prey. The stress and burden of that chronic behavior would hamper whatever natural biological or physiological processes that normally take place in the brain. And instead, it just slowly suffocates it. Who knows? That dysfunction could be what's actually causing the misfolding of the alpha-synuclein proteins in the first place. All right, enough of that. Okay, we're good. Whew. That's when I went back and thought of the 9 habits of the blue zones again. Remember these? And the ones I didn't think were worth paying attention to? I've never been so wrong in my life. Especially purpose and downshifting. You see, if we were to visualize a day in the week of the Bluezonians, is that what they're called? You don't know. What do you mean you don't know? I'm broadcasting this. I'm going to look like a fool. A fool, I tell you. Yeah, don't worry. We're still friends. For them, if we were to visualize their week, I imagine it would look something like this. 16 waking hours, 7 days, protected for life. Now, if we were to visualize the average person, I believe it would look something like this. This could represent anywhere from natural aging to mild cognitive impairment. And now, this is what I believe a typical week would look like for a victim of Parkinson's. A constant, destructive buildup of stress and inflammation that physically wears on the brain. So once I realized what I was doing to myself, I wanted to see if changing my behavior would stop my disease's progression. So I put it to the test. Dr. Michael Greger. Love that guy. In a non-placebo, single, non-blind, non-randomized trial of one participant, I put it to the test on myself, and I downshifted. I closed my eyes and took in one of the deepest cleansing breaths of my life. I held it for just a moment and then exhaled. Then I inhaled again just as deep, filling my lungs to the fullest capacity and holding it for just a moment, and then exhaling, but with purpose, by focusing on my head and letting the exiting air soothe and calm my mind and physically feeling the release of pressure and stress that was in my head, feeling it in the base of my brain right where it meets up with sinus cavity. I did this a couple more times and then got back to work. 5 minutes later, I did it again. 5 minutes after that, I did it again, and 10 minutes after that. Again and again and again, throughout the day, several times an hour, and in total, I probably did this over 50 times. Whatever it took to maintain this state of mind best I could for the rest of the day. Whenever I felt the pressure return, I would stop. I'd clear my head again. Then something unexpected happened. At around 3 p.m., as I was writing an email, I noticed I could type again without almost any hesitation. A mere 6 hours after I made my realization, I was gaining back some of my abilities. I was in pure disbelief. But something else unexpected also happened that day. As I was wrapping up for work for the day, I cleared my head one last time, paused for just a few moments, stood up and grabbed my jacket to leave. Suddenly, all the pressure came flooding back. It felt so unreal. At that moment, I knew how bad I was. It was basically a conditioned response of stress. Do you remember how earlier I had said I had some brain fog? Let me describe that in a bit more detail. Card games that I'd played for over 20 years became difficult for me to follow. I'd organized the hand I was dealt, but I couldn't follow the play. My job, it grew increasingly challenging. The work was mostly the same. It just took me longer to complete tasks. I worked later and later. Shorter lunches. Soon I was working weekends just so I could feel like I was keeping up. It wasn't more workload, it was just less production. At my worst, I remember being at work on a Saturday for 6 hours. When I reviewed what I had accomplished, it was barely 90 minutes worth of work. I was confused, I was lost, frustrated, and I was dejected. That day felt like a living nightmare. My work was still getting done, but at what cost? And it wasn't my job, it was my approach to how I handled everyday events and challenges of both work and life. When I was at work, I would think of home. When I was at home, I would think of work. I was always in both places, but never fully present in either, creating a feeling of angst that's best defined informally as a feeling of persistent worry about something trivial. An example of that would be how every day when I get ready for work, I felt like I was always running late. Y'all, I've worked in an office for over 20 years, time clock free, and ain't nobody ever said to me when I got there, "Running a little late there, Brian," or "Hey, where you been?" And yet, pretty much on a regular basis, I always felt like I was always running 5 minutes behind. I also knew driving in which of the over 1 dozen traffic lights I'd probably hit red. And yet, I felt like if I was just a couple car lengths closer, I'd make that next green light. Persistent worry over something trivial. And during that time, when I was struggling the most and I would leave work, I would be thinking of what I had accomplished that day and if it would be approved. I was thinking about what I was working on and where I was leaving off. I was also thinking about what I hadn't gotten to yet and how I needed to get to it the next morning. I was thinking of how late it had gotten and how my wife, all too often, was waiting on me. I would even think ahead about traffic on my way home and how much it would hold me up. It's not like I was leaving work. I would carry it all with me. So that day, when I stood up and put my jacket on, I knew how bad I was and what, for years, had slowly been destroying me, never having a clue. So I sat down, cleared my head again, and then left. I continued all the way home to try and keep myself in check. Deep breath after deep, cleansing breath. So I know what you're thinking. That's great, you felt better for a day. But what happened then? Which brings me to my one-time running sub-segment. After a while. Budget graphics. Folks, I've been sitting over there, right over there, telling you about my first day. But I'm sure you're interested in knowing what happened sometime after that. Well, after a while, I continued to feel better and better. Specifically, the next day and the day after that. I would look down at myself and have the sense of healing. I once again could carry a coffee cup through the office with my left hand. Stirring oatmeal and using a salt shaker, all improved. Meaningless to others, but significant and noticeable to me. Overall, I was just feeling better. Then, sometime, after a while, after that, something really amazing happened. About 2 weeks after this new perspective, I was on my way to the store, which was only a couple miles away, and I looked down. And I noticed that I was driving with my left hand on the steering wheel without even thinking of it. In that moment, I'm not kidding, I almost cried because I knew I had beaten Parkinson's and my symptoms were still lessening. Every day, day after day, all without changes to medication. Too good to be true? Hear me out. In a Parkinson's brain, there are functioning neurons and there's dead neurons. Okay, is this how we're going to do this? All right. By the time a person knows that they have Parkinson's, it's believed that over 70% of the neurons in a specific region of the brain are dead. But here's what me and my self-taught brain thinks. There's a gray area in your gray matter. Much like if a person drinks too much alcohol, it doesn't kill the brain cells, it simply impairs them until the alcohol in the body and mind is cleared. With Parkinson's, many neurons have died. But I believe many neurons may just be impaired, holding on, waiting for relief. What I believe is when a Parkinson's patient relaxes long enough, a small degree of healing and restoration can take place. Unproven? Sure. But I'll leave that to science to prove or disprove. I don't care. After months of this, I'm better now than I was then. I used to sit at work and think of how differently my left felt from my right. One side was diseased, the other side seemingly healthy. Now I can go for stretches at a time and I don't even think about it because they both feel pretty similar and it doesn't get my attention. I can once again lean on a counter with my arms out. Previously, my left arm would continuously tremble. Now, nothing. When I was diagnosed, my doctor had me stand with my arms at my side. First, she would have me stand on my right foot. Fine. Then on my left. I was completely wobbly, like I was standing on an exercise ball. It was then that I noticed getting dressed meant leaning on a dresser or sitting on the edge of a bed. Now when I stand on my left foot, I look like this. Just not as good in a suit as that Brian. But make no mistake, as any neurologist watching this will tell you, I still have Parkinson's. Writing is still a challenge, and I can't run much further than at the time of my diagnosis. And from time to time, my PD still gets pissy, but evenly so. It's seemingly less. So, based on my own reasoning and the examples set forth by others, I no longer fear my Parkinson's progression. Now, someday, I may eat those words. And quite frankly, I'll probably choke on them because letters have sharp corners and they're hard to chew. And Parkinson's patients can develop a problem with swallowing. But for now, I'll take what I can get and see what happens. Given where I was and how far I've come in such a short amount of time gives me hope. And I wanted to share this with others to either benefit from or study further. Do I think that this can work for others with Parkinson's? Yes. Do I think that this can work for those with Lewy body disease? Maybe. Do I think that this can work for those with mild cognitive decline? Possibly. And do I think that this can help with those with Alzheimer's? I don't know, but hopefully. And am I qualified to make any of those statements? Absolutely not. By trade, I'm a graphic designer. So yeah, some dude who went to art school is trying to school you in neuroscience. How messed up is that? I work with text and graphics to design layouts and websites. But in my job, I commonly troubleshoot bits of code to fix problems. I also review website data for decision making. By profession, I troubleshoot and analyze the same two components I use to determine all this. Throw in a bit of creative thinking and naiveness, and you get someone who's willing to look at Parkinson's differently. Need more convincing? All right, let's revisit the three things I mentioned before: exercise, coffee, and smoking, and take another look at what could be going on. When left to one's routine, a Parkinson's patient's stress level over time looks like this. When faced with the diagnosis, a person may start to exercise 4 days a week, and that could look like this. At this point, you can see why Parkinson's slows down. It still exists because they still have the same personality traits and habits that makes them them, but there's periods of relief from the destructive behavior in their mind. Taken a little further, 5 or 6 days of exercise could look like this. Now with coffee or tea, along with the antioxidant benefits, consider how relaxing the aroma and the taste of someone's beverages a couple times a day. Coffee and tea drinking is really not seen as a treatment, it's just seen as beneficial. So, since it's so passive, the impact is far less. But we can see just enough relief to show a benefit. Anything to get that theoretical boa constrictor and no, you're not bringing him back. Good. To loosen its grip and bring relief. And smokers? I don't need to show you a chart for you to know that smokers know how to take a break. They do it like 10 to 20 times a day, like clockwork, which is probably why 50% of those at risk for the disease never progress to a diagnosis in the first place. And for the sake of all that's good and holy in the world, do not start smoking to treat your PD. Whew. Hawaiian breeze. Nice. Lastly, regarding behavior's effect on neurodegenerative diseases. Socializing shows to have a positive effect as well. This is likely due to a person being less inward with pent-up thoughts and being more relaxed and outwardly exchanging thoughts and ideas with the person in front of them, also providing periods of relief. Now, let's imagine a Parkinson's patient who takes their diagnosis in stride. They start exercising daily and relaxing more. They join a support group. They make new friends from the group or reconnect with old ones. They spend more time with family because time is more precious to them now than before. And they have a purpose, focusing on the good while they can, and maybe throw in a healthier diet with more antioxidant and anti-inflammatory foods, and you get individuals like this who can go 20 years with very little progression. One last point on this thinking. Parkinson's is a terrible disease. And since the time of my diagnosis, I wasn't going to fool myself by hearing all the positives. I wanted to be realistic, and I really wanted to know what this could potentially do to me. I've read and heard terrible stories about people who don't take their diagnosis as well. From those stories, I imagine this. They had to stop working. All the days become the same. They become disengaged. They withdraw and basically shut down. And from what I've heard, they're gone in as little as 3 years. I'll be right back. So, can we identify a person who's at risk for Parkinson's by their outwardly appearance? Not likely. But what's important is that everyone knows the risk of having too much going on at once, or never being able to put things aside, and instead carrying it all with them all the time. Meanwhile, their brain is stuck running in the red, causing a buildup of chronic stress. Similar to that, like in an athlete who builds up lactic acid when performing at maximum effort to the point of failure, but in this instance, the person not knowing enough to stop. But if we were trying to imagine what's going on the inside and what that would look like, I would picture this. Hey, a callback. Yeah. I know what you're thinking. I picked this because it represents a fictitious group of individuals and not real people. It even says so in the closing credits. Nope, not there. A little further. Yep, right there. Fictitious. Seriously, I don't want to offend anyone. But the anxious character of Alex P. Keaton is offset by the calm of the rest of the family. It mainly focuses on his Republican stance as a protagonist, but all the same, he's a very anxious character who's always on, portrayed as someone who's wound up, high energy, and always driven. Where anxiety and fear holds back, anxiousness and eagerness pushes forward, constantly. This is what I believe I've come to learn and identify through researching Parkinson's. Someone that is always trying to be 1 or 2 steps further ahead than they presently are. A constant multitasking of the mind that doesn't routinely take a break, eventually wears on one's overall health. Whether or not someone appears calm, cool, collected on the outside, mentally they could always be either trying to get caught up or trying to get further ahead than they presently are and never pausing. To them, this is just how they operate. It's their normal. Now, you don't have to slow down and think like a sloth. But ask yourself, are your thoughts moving smoothly like highway traffic going 70 miles per hour? Or are your thoughts like bumper cars where everybody's cutting everybody else off and it results in a 70-car pileup with widespread destruction and what's left is impeded and delayed? Now, going forward, I know what you're thinking. Cool, no more exercise. Hold on. Exercise is still definitely a good thing, along with the reports of a benefit for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Exercise such as vigorous, high-intensity interval training increases the volume of mitochondria in the body. And mitochondrial dysfunction in the brain that's brought on by misfolding of alpha-synuclein is central to the progression of Parkinson's. Now, this is me talking science, so pure speculation. But if relaxing the mind clears it and allows either the mitochondria or the alpha-synuclein to function properly, exercise may very well replenish the mitochondria to fill in what's needed to save the impaired neurons. All that could be part of why exercise has worked so well up to this point. You just need to get rid of the catalyst that's causing the disease in the first place. And taking a break like a couple minutes of meditation, it's just not enough. I know, I've tried. I tried it in 2019 when I was desperate and stuff just didn't make sense. And I tried it again after I was diagnosed in 2020. And I tried it in January and February of this year, 2021. I kept trying because I heard of the benefits of meditation, but I just didn't feel anything. So it was hard for me to stick with. But I was only doing it for like a minute a day, and I wasn't clearing out the pressure. It was more like I was just hitting pause on my mental DVR, and then I would just pick it up right where I left off with no beneficial change. And that's just not going to cut it for those who are neurotic to the bone. No doubt about it. So, to prevent from becoming a neurotic basket case, you've got to focus on clearing out the garbage to reduce the pressure and keep it away all day. Then once you do that, I believe you'll start to get the most out of whatever exercise and physical activity suits you best, and it will most likely do you a world of good. Earlier, I mentioned other neurodegenerative diseases, such as Lewy body, mild cognitive decline, and Alzheimer's. None of which I had planned to mention when I decided to make this video, but at some point I went back and I read this article again. Near the end of the article, it said on how neuroticism was also a high risk factor for Alzheimer's. Same trigger, different manifestation. Then there's this recently published article that stated ways to prevent Alzheimer's with physical activity, social networks, friends, and family. And there's articles and reports just like that all over the internet, all citing valid studies and echoing the same observations. Dysfunction manifests itself in numerous ways, depending on many factors. But just like a smoker won't suffer from a day or a week of smoking, a person won't suffer from exam weeks or a big presentation pitch. But given enough time of a bad habit or relentless bad behavior, you can be sure it will manifest itself in some way. As a person with a diagnosis of Parkinson's, you may think that I'm desperate for any answers. Objectively, I'm not. I'm deliberate. As I said before, part of my job is to troubleshoot problems. Now, in order to fix something, it has to be reproducible, which isn't always easy to do. And if you can't replicate it, you can't fix it. This also applies to figuring out Parkinson's. Nobody's been able to replicate it. It's not genetic, it's not exclusive to gender or geographic regions. It doesn't care about economic standing, and it stood the test of time. So this is nothing new that can be blamed on microwave, vaccines, or cell towers. It's been recognized for over 200 years, seemingly striking at random. That is, until now. Now we can reproduce it, because when there's an 80% causation rate among one group of people, I consider that reproducible, and we can control it based on the near zero instances among another group of people that live and behave in an exact complete opposite manner. I consider this solvable. As of 2017, the annual cost of Parkinson's alone in the US was over $50 billion. And if I'm right, I'll just take one, and you can all keep the change. But seriously, I haven't placed any ads on this video or sought compensation from anyone featured in it. I'm simply doing it for the good of the people who are affected by this terrible condition, and hoping that it doesn't affect anyone else. Because Parkinson's is on the rise, and it's affecting adults at younger ages, like me, according to this report in the fall of 2020, stating a rise of 50% for those aged 30 to 64. And it's no wonder, after the rise of computers and multitasking, and now all the streaming services, doom scrolling, and fear of missing out, and the always-on mentality of a digital society, it makes sense why. People are engaged more and more, and disconnecting less and less. Pause. Relax. Disengage. To my wife and son, we've seen the darkest days that life has to offer. Hopefully, those days are behind us and brighter days are now ahead, with all the joy and promise life has to offer. To everyone else out there, I hope you found this video beneficial, and brighter days lie ahead for you as well. And may we all be able to enjoy our families with renewed hope for the next generation. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go on a bike ride with my wife. Take care of yourself. Hey, can we get someone to proof this? Yeah, I don't want to kill off Colbert and Meyer in the end credits here, so. All right, cool, thanks. All right, everybody. Bye. One last thing. I think the human body is really designed to allow for an immediate release of stress. By taking deep breaths in and exhaling out while focusing on your head, so it soothes your mind. Much in the same way as if someone would caress your hand or arm with a caring touch to relax you. But with this, it'd be breathing. This is probably works because of the proximity of the sinus cavity to the substantia nigra. They're right next to each other in your head. Thus, immediately calming and relaxing your head and your mind. When people are having an anxiety attack, they're freaking out because they think they're not getting enough oxygen, and then what do? They breathe deeper and faster. But in reality, this may be the mind just trying to calm itself with deep, soothing breaths. Before and after I was diagnosed, I would catch myself needing to take multiple deep breaths consecutively, and I'd be thinking, why do I feel like I'm not getting enough oxygen? I didn't know why, but it was more than likely my brain was trying to say, whoa, time out. I need a break up here to be relaxed. And now looking back, I honestly feel that's like that's what was going on. Your brain needs to take a break. It needs to relax. It needs to chill. At some point over the months that I was creating this video, I saw this shirt in the store. I bought 3. I'm going to have this shirt for life as to remind me to chill, to relax, and to breathe. Take breaths and feel the sense of calm through your head and allow it to cleanse and purge the pressure in your mind. That's all. Take care.